is Yuval Calderon. I'm a product manager in NetApp. With me is Jens Bowen from StormReply. What we wanted to present to you guys is essentially our approach into enterprise-grade data foundation for GenAI. The way I'm going to present it is I'm going to give you a bit of a crash course on GenAI, what it is. Hopefully everybody knows what it is by now, and everybody is kind of on that journey. And then we'll go into why does data matters in that journey. What's the angle? Why is NetApp presenting about GenAI? I think it's important to make that connection. We'll talk a bit about how can we help you guys get started, get a good foundation for that GenAI journey. Jens will join us and share with us his insight from StormReply. How are they utilizing NetApp for their journey to accelerate it and to smooth that out and provide more value to their customers. I'll demonstrate a demo for you guys so you can see how you can get started and what does it entail. And lastly, we'll talk about call for actions and some resource that will help you along the way. In the end, hopefully, we'll have also time for Q&A. So keep your question in mind, and whatever you want to ask, feel free in the end. And let's get started. So for GenAI in general, the way I think about AI, at least I've been in the software industry all of my mature life, it's usually AI means innovation. Until 2 years ago when there was GenAI, AI meant innovation, but meant a lot of resources, a lot of efforts, and a lot of hard work. And mostly it was predictable AI, at least the ones that I've seen, like anomaly detections and things of that sort, where you need to build. For example, in NetApp, we have a ransomware detection that's based on AI. That was the applications. In the last 2 years, now we have generative AI. The idea in generative AI is really to simplify the journey. So you have a foundation model that was already trained. A lot of the hard work was done for you by the awesome companies that are mentioned below and the awesome models that were mentioned below. And what you're in charge of is essentially the adaptation layer. So taking that awesome work, augmenting it to your need, and bringing out the different assets, innovations to your company, right? Being able to use that to leap forward in what you do. The two typical ones are either a text implementation, like a chatbot, and we also see a lot of text and images implementations, meaning you ask something and you get a beautiful image. You'll see one in the presentation as an example. So just to summarize, essentially, you have the capability that GenAI provides, which is generating new content closely to what you provided, but it is new content and it allows you to do new use cases. It's based on that foundation model that I mentioned. So in Amazon, the easiest example would be Bedrock that provides it, and I'll show that in the presentation. Essentially using that foundation model that is provided to you as it says, as a foundation to that application. You customize it with your domain-specific data, either by fine-tuning or RAG or other ways. And you're able to do different use cases. So as I mentioned, chatbot is an easy one to know, but code generation, for example, is a very useful use cases in a lot of different industries. And the key thing is it brings innovation a lot easier. Right? If you wanted to do a machine learning project before, probably a year of development, with GenAI, you can get an innovation a lot faster and bring value to your customer. And when we look at the market itself, everybody is kind of jumping on that wagon. Majority of the customer already have things in production for GenAI. So I can, from a NetApp perspective, for example, I'll demonstrate Workload Factory in a few moments that has GenAI inside of it, but also traditional NetApp, which is a pretty established company of 30 years, has GenAI embedded into it already in a few areas of the business. When we look at the ways to use GenAI, there's a few ways you can take GenAI and implement it in your organization. Obviously, when you take only the foundation model, I'll show why it's not that attractive. It could be very useful for a day-to-day job, but when your organization, you do want to take and a bit augment it. So there's a few layers. The first layer is essentially prompt engineering. What does it mean? It means that you ask essentially the right question to the model, right? You engineer your prompt to get the right answer. It could be hidden to the customer, to the user, or it could be part of what the user is asked to do. The second layer, which is retrieval augment generation, what it means is doing the interaction with the foundation model, you augment it with your organizational data. It helps you get more context, and it helps you bring and ground the foundation model to what you need. The more you go up, like agentic, fine-tuning and retuning and retraining, those are also ways, and they're correct in some cases. Like, for example, retraining means to build your own foundation model. There's a really interesting article by Amazon around Bloomberg that did that. They did their own GPT. It could be the right answer for your organization, but as you can see, the more you're going up, the investment that you need to do is a lot higher to get a yield, to get innovation. So the way we're seeing it currently is that retrieval augmented generation is essentially the easy button to unlock that innovation, being able to unlock your data to the foundation model without going through a cycle of training or retraining or fine-tuning that requires a lot of different resources, both from compute and from a human resource, right? It's not developers anymore. You require other type of resources to make that happen. So I promised the AI-generated photo, so that's my AI-generated photo. And the key here is really that if you want to get an innovation out of a foundation model, everybody has access to it. The key thing is to really unlock your data towards it, right? Bring your own twist into GenAI and making sure that what you provide to your users, for example, if I'm a software company, is unique to me and I'm providing a new value that is based on my data, but whether it's internal or external to customers. The easiest way to explain it, and that's the easiest way that I like to explain it, is if you look at a really typical chatbot, right? So what we have here is a virtual assistant and a foundation model based on Bedrock in this case. And when I ask it what is RAG without any context, what I get is essentially a very generic answer. It might be a right answer for somebody. It's definitely not for me. I didn't ask about red, amber, green. I didn't ask about random access generation. I kind of wanted to learn about GenAI, but it doesn't have the context of what I'm talking about, so it doesn't have any idea. When I look at a RAG model, a RAG application, so what we have here is essentially the same foundation model that I used before, but I have my knowledge base, my data of the organization. So when I look on the right-hand side, I do have my data, my unstructured data, and I have a vector DB. Essentially, vector DB is what allows you to transform the data that you have into something that can augment the foundation model. And now when I provided the foundation model with my data, I'll get the right answer. It will be in the context of what I'm looking for. So I can augment pretty easily my chatbot, add the data that I need, and I'll get an answer that is the right one. In my case, I wanted to learn about RAG. Now, taking that data, especially in organization and enterprises, typically our customers are enterprises, taking that data and trying to augment means a project where you need to understand how to get the data there. And there's a lot of different challenges we can talk about when you're trying to do that. So first and foremost is where is that data, right? You need to bring it to that foundation model. So whether the data is on premises or in different silos, you need to centralize it into that vector DB. Sometimes it's not possible to migrate the data. Sometimes it's costly in time and time efficient, and you don't want to duplicate the data set, right? The biggest nightmare of somebody that does data strategy is data silos. You don't want to create another data silos in order to get that done. You want to extend your infrastructure into that new innovation that you're doing. You want to do that from two reasons. The first reason is you don't want the data silo. The second one is you don't want to reapply that security as well, right? You copy the data, you migrated it off. I've been in numerous cloud migration. You just copy the data, you lost everything, all the context of the data. We see the context of those files specifically as a very important thing, right? I have access to one file. My friend doesn't have access to that file. I want that to be in the context of GenAI as well. When I ask a question, I need the specific answer based on what I can see, not based on everybody's repository. So keeping that is a big challenge, right? Reapplying that to a large set of data. So if I have to summarize it, I like to put it in two buckets. The first bucket is how do I get the data there, right? How do I make sure that I have the data there, and it needs to be also the latest data always, right? If I look at GenAI applications, one of them will be product documentation. You don't want answer from a product documentation from a year ago. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge is around the data infrastructure itself, right? I want the data to be secure. We're essentially creating the gemstone of your organization a lot of the time, right? The new innovation. So you need to apply the same data management, same data protection to that data as well, and you make sure you're extending that into your new GenAI innovation as well. So when we look at how we create the data foundation, essentially what we have to offer in AWS is FSX for NetApp ONTAP. But before I go to what is FSX for NetApp ONTAP, I do want to touch a bit about the common approach, right? When I look at you as a customer will go to AWS, and what you'll ask to create a RAG pipeline, you usually will end up with something similar to what I'm showing here, which is essentially Amazon Bedrock and a knowledge base under it, which in essence, if you're doing a POC, you want to get a quick turnaround, it's a great approach. It works great. I tried it. I was happy with it. But it does have a few challenges, especially if you're looking at enterprise level. So the first challenge is that the data needs to reside on S3. Now, that may change in the future, but currently, you need to copy the data into S3, and you need to ingest it there in order to make that possible, meaning that you need to be in charge of moving the data to S3, being in charge of that pipeline. You need to make sure you're reapplying the permissions based on the YAML roles on S3, and you need to copy that over. I know we looked at the people that are thinking about doing a RAG or a GenAI project. That's the biggest challenge, is losing the data security and having data leakage. So that's a big challenge when you look at knowledge base. And lastly, you're a bit losing control on your data infrastructure. So there is a vector DB offering, but essentially if you're choosing this approach, you kind of linkaging control over your vector DB implementation. So a lot around price performance, you give control to somebody else, and data management, data protection of that knowledge base is part of that solution for good and for bad and for good. Now, when we look at FSX in this context and why does it make sense, So first of all, I wanted to give you a bit of context for anybody that's not aware of FSX for NetApp ONTAP. So FSX for NetApp ONTAP is essentially a first-party service that AWS delivers to you that is based on the ONTAP OS. ONTAP, when you look outside of AWS on premises, is 33% of the data in the world sits on ONTAP. So probably in your organization there's an ONTAP, even if you know it or not. It's there, and it's a key capability, and we'll see why, to connect the data into that data foundation. In terms of capabilities, so it has a lot of different capabilities. Let me move to the next slide to show you exactly what we can provide. In terms of deployment, so typically what you're seeing there is a multi-AZ deployment of FSX. It spans across the AZs, and it allows you to access data from both of them. And the way it allows you to access data is essentially whichever protocol that you want to access the data with. So we support SMB, NFS, S3, and block storage with iSCSI and NVMe over TCP. Another key feature here is the ability to also do multi-protocol access as well, which is something that our customers do a lot. So meaning accessing data both from S3 and SMB in the same time, or NFS and SMB. That can be a really powerful capability. So as I mentioned, it's on either single AZ or multi-AZ, depending on the deployment that you want to do. It has both a performance capability, so we provide you with a lot of unique performance capabilities, like a smart read cache, and we also do that with a storage cost optimization in mind. So meaning we provide read cache for the performance, and we also provide data tiering automatically between our tiers. So we have a SSD tier, and we have a capacity pool tier, and we allow you to smartly move that data. And cool. And the other key thing is you're not putting the data on an SSD or EBS, which is great, but EBS is a pretty dumb JBOD in the end of the day. You're putting it on a data management OS. So it means that you get both data protection and data management as part of it. I'll show you guys how it connects in a minute to a RAG pipeline, but think about it when you build that gemstone, you definitely want to put the protection and create snapshot of that data and make sure it's secure. One of the key things, as an example, is data poisoning, right? You want the ability. So data poisoning means that you created that pipeline, somebody entered wrong data, and it got into the application, right? So suddenly it will answer differently. So you definitely want to create snapshots, for example, and take back in time that attack, for example. And lastly, we have also the data mobility component. So remember, when I talked about challenges, we had the data infrastructure. We solved it with the FSX until now. The ability to create a replication and caching in ONTAP is really a game changer. So taking your data, either caching it into the cloud or replicating into the cloud, makes it a very easy way to create and bridge that gap to the data that you need for your GenAI application. So we have both SnapMirror, which is a replication engine, and we have FlexCache. Both of them are really unmatched in terms of how you can move your data back and forth from the cloud to on-prem, or between different regions. And because it's a first-party service, you enjoy both the manageability aspect. So in the bottom line, you can see the different ways. And we really try to cater both to an AWS customers. So you have all the different AWS tools alongside all the traditional NetApp tools that our customers love. And on the top side, because it's a first-party service, you can integrate into all the AWS services a lot easier. It's part of the family. We do get like the first-party access, which is awesome. So if we try to summarize everything that I said into a slide, which I tried, hopefully it's not too much words, this is how I connect the dots, right? So if you have your data that is in your organization and you're trying to connected with to AWS to create the GenAI application, ONTAP can definitely provide you with the data mobility. We do that without transforming the data, right? You're extending your infrastructure. So all the ACLs, everything on the file metadata, also folders might be a key thing. All of that is preserved when you create that extension to the cloud. You can keep the data refreshed because you didn't create now a migration or file copy kind of solution. You use SnapMirror. SnapMirror will keep the data refreshed at the destination, allowing you to forget about that problem and enjoy that capability and have one less challenge to worry about. And lastly, you can use ONTAP to also optimize that infrastructure, right? We're talking about the challenges, but you always want to do it in a very optimized, cost-optimized way. So that's another thing that you can be sure that ONTAP takes care of, either with deduplication compression or with the data tiering. It will all be optimized to the cost that you desire for such a solution. And lastly, when that gemstone is in production, you're starting to use it, you can use all the different data protection mechanisms on top of that foundation to make sure that what you're building can be used and can be used confidently in your organization. So when we look at it from an AWS perspective, so I mentioned Bedrock. There's 3 different services that AWS provides. Amazon Q is the low-code solution for GenAI. You have Bedrock, which is more a builder-centric. So you get LLM essentially as a service, as an API, and you get SageMaker, which is more towards a data scientist. Doesn't matter the direction that you decide to do, the compute side, I will say, of that solution. We can work with all of them as the data foundation. We can solve all the data challenges for all 3 solutions. And in the end of the presentation, I do a resource slide that I'll share with you in the end of the presentation. So how can we, as NetApp, I talked about the data foundation, probably a lot of homework for you guys to go and implement FSXN. So how can we help you guys do that faster? The way that we decided to help you guys do it faster is by developing BlueXP Workload Factory, specifically for GenAI. So what Workload Factory essentially does for GenAI, it does it, by the way, for other workloads as well. So if not in my talk track, but you can do the same for databases, VMware, and other workloads. The idea is really to take key workloads and help you as a customer accelerate yourself and be able to take all the different things like connecting FSX into Bedrock, creating a vector DB, applying the different ACL permissions. All of those we took as a service, and we essentially provided to you as free of charge to accelerate and create a good foundation for your solution. So let's see how it works in a customer context. So if we think about the customer, so in this example, it's a life science customer. Their goal is to help their research project and reduce the time in that research project. They want to build a virtual assistant. And obviously, it's a life science company. I don't know if you guys work with a life science company, but they have a lot of regulation that you need to adhere to. So that's the setup, right? They have a lot of data everywhere. They need to adhere to their controls. So they have a very strict control on the data itself. And they want to make sure also that they are deploying something that is best in class in terms of infrastructure as well. They don't want to mess around with it. They want to develop and create that adaptation layer that I talked about. So the way they will do it by default, they will copy the data, and they will try to synchronize the data, apply YAML policies for meeting the permissions and making sure the data you don't have any data leakage. And they'll try to create an infrastructure of vector DB in order to do it. Now let's see how we can do it from Workload Factory perspective. So if we look at what we were essentially deploying or offering you as a customer, what we're doing is we're deploying in your account our solution while providing a SaaS layer for managing that solution. So the solution is comprised from a few components. So first of all, we have the AI engine. So essentially, the AI engine is deployed in your account and is in charge of two things. One, interacting with Bedrock and ingesting your data. One of the key design points was not to get your data outside of your organization. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the knowledge base itself based on FSXN. So keeping your data either as file and as the embedding as part of the FSX to enjoy the different data management, data protection that we talked about. And lastly, we provide a retrieve and generate API. So we jumpstart you and we allow you to start interacting with the data immediately out of the solution without building additional components. So when we look at the workload factory itself, essentially the things we provide, as I mentioned, we deploy the infrastructure. So we're going into your account and we're deploying the right resources and allowing you to start building a lot faster. So that's a very quick and automatic process. Takes about 5 minutes and you can get started building your RAG pipeline. We construct a knowledge base. Essentially, a knowledge base is the data that you will use in order to build your RAG application. It constructs both of the data source and the vector DB, and it allows you to essentially start embedding your data and creating that foundation for the new RAG application. Obviously, you will need to choose the different data source. Currently, we support FSX data source, either SMB and NFS. We apply on that knowledge base also the different capabilities that ONTAP provides. So if you remember, I talked about data protection. So you can apply data protection to that knowledge base. And you're able to retrieve and generate out of that knowledge base and create an application. Now, we do two interesting things with the retrieve and generate. The first thing we're doing is we're doing an ACL-aware retrieve and generate, which means that the permissions of the user are in the context of that retrieve and generate as well. The way we're doing it is when we're embedding the data, we're also embedding the ACLs as metadata. So it means that the knowledge base consists of the data, and when we ask the question, that data is being filtered according to the ACLs that are on the files itself. So the answer that the user gets is the answer in his context with his permissions that he provides. The second interesting thing we do around security is the ability to also create a data foundation without any private information. So what we're doing as part of the embedding process itself is we're taking any private information and we're not letting it reach even the RAG pipeline. So before the data is embedded, we're scanning the data, the chunks themselves, and we'll remove any data that is private information before it's being embedded. The way we're doing it is with data classification, which is a BlueXP service that NetApp provides. It's also free of charge as part of the solution. And essentially what you're getting in the end is you're getting an answer without those. If your data had those as part of your unstructured data, you are removing that risk that it will get into the LLMs, first of all, and into the user hands, second of all. And with that, I'll give the stage to Jens to showcase how Storm Reply is using all of those goodies.
Thanks, Yuval. Hi, everybody, also from my side. Thanks for being here. My name is Jens Bohnen. I'm Managing Director with Storm Reply. Storm Reply is part of the Reply network. So maybe by the show of hands, please show me if you've come across the name of Reply or the brand of Reply before. Okay, then I think it's a good thing that I'm here. Let me give you a bit of background, if you bear with me for a minute, so I can tell you, where we're coming from and what we're doing. So Reply is an Italian-born IT consultancy, and it's also a global service integrator. You see that we have a global footprint of more than 16,000 employees worldwide. We are at more than 2.1 billion in revenue, and you also see the number of more than 150 entities. So the idea behind the company network is to have a loose network of independent companies, and those companies are small and agile, innovative, and they have a very specific focus on a technology, a vertical, or a partnership. So in the case of Storm Reply is the brand that has 100% focus on AWS. And you can see here that what this really means in numbers, considering what it means for Reply to have or Storm Reply to have a focus on AWS. So we do have a lot of AWS competencies, which we can also source from the Reply network to plug in specific competencies that we need to achieve those competencies on AWS. We have a strategic collaboration agreement with AWS, also a master service agreement, and of course a lot of certified colleagues. In general, we are starting this year. We became a NetApp partner, and what we are doing is we're investing, or we are committing in the same way to the partnership with NetApp as we do with AWS. So today I'm here to celebrate the power of three, and I will dig a bit deeper into what that means from my perspective. So one key competency is missing in this list, and this is the generative AI competency. We were a launch partner with this new competency, and I give you a bit of history. We started with a RAG-based chatbot that we did for Audi end of last year. We presented it at the IA Mobility in Munich, automotive show, and it was during a time where a lot of people were talking about RAG and RAG-based chatbots and doing POCs. And we had the opportunity and the support and a great team from Audi to enable us to put a RAG-based chatbot into production back then. Back then, in Frankfurt, we had to start with SageMaker even, so there was no Bedrock at that time. So we started with SageMaker, and there was also no Bedrock knowledge base back then. So we had to do a lot of the heavy lifting, or parts of the heavy lifting ourselves. But this was also a great learning curve for ourselves, and it enabled us to take the learnings, a lot of learnings, and apply that also with the help of the Reply network to other verticals, to other industries. So on the shop floor in manufacturing, you mentioned pharma and life science, for example. Also one of the references, one of the projects that we're doing together with NetApp. Also supporting call center automation with Amazon Connect, for example. So really using GenAI in a broad range of offerings, as you can see here on the left. And that has helped, the last 12, 15 months of that has helped us to kind of gain key challenges, so to speak, from a customer perspective. You talked about some of them, Yuval, already. So first and foremost, of course, we are talking about companies that, here the first point you see that the integration to the existing systems is, as well as demonstrating business value. So we came across a lot of situations where companies have kind of a top-down instruction or mentality of we have to do something with GenAI. So in a lot of those cases, we're talking about companies that don't even have a real cloud strategy, nor do they have a data strategy. So for them, it is kind of like a leap in their cloud transformation when someone from top management says, we have to do something with GenAI. The next thing, of course, is also the speed of development, because a lot of those companies, especially from the German market, I can tell that a lot of customers, they kind of try to over-engineer or over-plan. So they want to come up with a plan, Ideally, they have a data strategy, but they want to, as I said, to do something with GenAI. So speed is a key, of course, to really source the business value, also in comparison to the competition. The amount of data is a thing. So data mobility and generally the integration effort that you see that is necessary to do something with GenAI. And you touched upon it. The concerns also when we talk about speed and speed and go-to-market. The concerns about data privacy and personally identifiable information, and also least privilege principles. So this is where people fear that this is left out. And then generally, if you look at the market situation overall, everything happens under increased cost pressure. So from my perspective, where does NetApp plug into this for us as a partner? This is where we definitely see that the workload factory itself, especially with those customers that I mentioned that are maybe in the middle of their cloud transformation or they don't have an idea, where to, even about the use cases. So we can help them also around ideas and shaping use cases. But the key message is that with the workload factory, we are able to really go into a demo, from the start to the finish, go into a demo in less than an hour. So we can set up a demo with the customer data, no, not demo data, but real customer data, by simply sourcing from what NetApp is good at, the experience that they have in data. Also the portfolio of support of the protocols. So this is, I think, a key aspect when it comes to really helping those customers, because usually you can tell them in the first contact meeting that while they are trying to make a plan for their GenAI strategy, you can have already 5 use cases, 5 business cases proven or dismissed. So that's, I think, a key aspect. Also, as I mentioned, you can demo real customer data. So you don't need to do demo data. And this, of course, goes hand in hand with the fact that when you take real customer data, you want to make sure that privacy is being obeyed, or that you mentioned access control lists, so that NetApp ensures, also NetApp BlueXP ensures that, first of all, there's no personally identifiable information, and that access permissions to the real source data is being obeyed in the actual demo then. So you want to prevent, of course, oversharing of information like we saw in the past with other products. I forgot the name, but it has something to do with someone sitting next to someone flying an airplane, I think. So this you definitely want to prevent when it comes to the real company data that you're using. And of course, you want to accelerate. So this is the last point in the list. You want to accelerate either the proof or the dismissal of use cases to really dig into additional business opportunities for what you can do, or opportunities for your company. I brought a reference architecture that demonstrates where the workload factory is a foundation into how we build, or how we are able to build projects for customers. So it's the foundation with everything that you all explained, and of course in our case it plugs into Bedrock, which already gives you, as you said, LLM as a service. So you also already have a variety of large language models that you can choose from. In the last few months, we saw and we invested into also integrating our own LLM gateway. So for multiple reasons, having the opportunity or the chance to integrate even more flexibility when it comes to load balancing, cost optimization, you look into different use cases. You can even go as far as to, we're looking into multi-LLM use cases where you say, okay, I want to have the reasoning done by one model, I want to have the summary done by another model, or you have a small local model that decides, what model for this context is best used. So there are different reasons why you would have another a layer of indirection or be in front of your model, so an abstraction layer, so to speak, to have more flexibility in the background. Flexible vector DB, of course, is one of the aspects. So to use the sources, we also saw some announcements on that for Bedrock yesterday already. So things and situations changing quickly as usual. Efficient data storage, yes, this is where NetApp plugs in and where their competency of 30 years of storage comes in, considering deduplication and things like that. Ransomware protection, you mentioned it. Compliance PII filter is a key, especially when you talk about speed. You want to be sure that your speed does not compromise security or any oversharing of information. And then what we saw also in our internal development evolution of also the mentioned chatbot with Audi, for example, that it goes more into from a conversational aspect. We are going more into an agent-based interaction, so not only having a conversation but also triggering real things, be it provisioning of infrastructure, triggering processes. So there's a lot of development in that area that we see today. And with that, I'd like to hand over back to Yuval for the demo.
Cool.
Thank you.
Sure. Let's see it in action. So I prepared a quick video for you because it's kind of hard to do a live demo here. So hopefully you forgive me for that. What you're seeing is essentially the workload factory, right? In this example, it's part of BlueXP, which is our a way to deliver data services. And essentially, what we build for you is really that RAG pipeline foundation. So on the left side, you're seeing the different knowledge base that I have. And on the right side, essentially, we're already interacting with the data. And the key thing in this demo is to really show you guys the sensitive information filter, right? So if I ask that question to LLM with RAG, you can see that with connecting the data, I can easily kind of get the data that is private. So I'll create a new knowledge base now. That knowledge base, as we mentioned, we're basing on Bedrock, so you can select exactly the different mechanisms that you want in terms of models. But we're also enabling that data guardrail as part of that knowledge base. So if you make that selection, essentially what we'll do is we'll omit that private information from that RAG or from that knowledge base. So with this new creation, I'm using obviously FSX as the foundation here. So I'll select the SVM and volume. Another key thing that you'll notice here is I'm also applying a data protection as part of it. So the last selection that I have is the type of data protection. So we're utilizing the snap mirror technology as well to protect that data. So you'll embed it, and you'll get a data that is already protected in case of data poisoning or deletion or other attacks that can happen. So let's create that knowledge base. So once that knowledge base is created, you can see on the left-hand side, I have a few of those already created. One of them is as raw data, so you can select not to apply those filters. But if you look in the bottom, you can see that I have one with a guardrail protecting it. So if I'll ask for the first time, you'll see I'll get an answer. In this case, it's a valid answer. It may contain things you don't want to share with the user. And obviously, with this knowledge base and with this foundation, you can go ahead and build the application on top of it. What I mentioned before is what you're seeing on the right-hand side is essentially a retrieve and generate API, right? This is the UI we implement in order to help you test it out. But from a knowledge base, you're able to create that application. So now I'll use a knowledge base with this data guardrail. And essentially what will happen is the LLM will get the same augmentation, but the data that the LLM is augmented with does not contain the private information. So the first answer will be the same because there's no private information in it. But when I'll ask a question that doesn't contain private information, the data will be omitted essentially from that answer. There is additional capabilities, for example, in Bedrock, like Bedrock guardrail. The key difference here in terms of implementation is this was done on the data itself, right? Guardrail protects you on the prompt level when you're chatting. This is protecting you from the data level. So a key takeaway is those work together, and you can implement both to create essentially a more secure solution. So in terms of key takeaway, AWS, one thing I want you to take is that together with AWS, we give you a good foundation to create your GenAI application. You can look at FSXN as the data foundation for those applications, and you can build a secure, cost-effective, and scalable solution with that. In terms of getting started, there's two approaches that we currently got out to market. There's a bit more resources that I'll share in the next slide, but these two approaches, one is the workload factory that I demonstrate. We also created an open source project together with AWS. So if you want to tinker more around, that's another option that we created that will allow you to do that as well. And lastly, there's a lot of different resources. You can find them all if you go to Workload Factory through the marketing page. All of those are there as well. So there's examples with Bedrock, and we also released some examples with Q and SageMaker. So whatever you guys want to go out and implement, we probably gave you a jump start that you can go and do. And with that, that's our presentation. One thing I didn't include, we do have a pretty large booth. So definitely, if you guys want to ask some more questions, know some more about NetApp, add out there. I don't know the number, but it's hard to miss. So feel free. And with that, if anybody has any questions, we'll be happy to take them.